Welcome to a very special live episode of Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Monday, December 9th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Tennessee game is in, I forgot to think about it, 12 days. 12 days. 12 days.
Yeah.
The game against Michigan in 355 days.
Okay.
Joined by Tony Gerdeman at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Tony, we now know how far away Ohio State's next game is. Big news. 12 days till the game against Tennessee. Buckeyes number 8 seed in the college football playoff. Tennessee number 9. That means home game in Ohio Stadium Saturday night, December 21st. Do you think, Tony, when all the Ohio State fans were complaining about all the noon kickoffs, somewhere a monkey paw curled and said, okay, you don't want a noon kickoff? Let's see how, not this noon kickoff.
Yeah, this is going to be the least noon kickoff of the season for the Buckeyes. 8 p.m., December 21st, first day of winter, perhaps?
Shortest day of the year in terms of sunlight? Yes.
So you're talking really dark,
Mm-hmm.
and so you're going to have all of the lights. But Ryan Day kept saying that the fans should be excited about this. The team is excited about this. The mention on ESPN show about Ohio State should have rather had a road game in the playoffs so that they wouldn't be booed is like.
Tony, lots of people say stupid stuff on TV, as it turns out. Tony, what was Alabama's record against teams with a record over 500, Tony? Anyway, speaking of stupid narratives, so yeah, this is an Ohio State fan base that is a little down, and an Ohio State team that was a little down coming after the Michigan game. Sounds from everything, what is Ryan Day going to say? But It sounds like, and it feels like you should be able to at this point. Now you kind of have, okay, now you know the next step. Mm-hmm. You knew you were in, now you know who you're playing. It's probably who they were largely expecting to play after the release of the playoff rankings last Tuesday. But it sounds like, okay, now there's some new focus. We've got someone over there on the Monarch machine right now. It's like, okay, like maybe people are sort of have stopped being just grumpy and now are sort of focused on moving forward.
Yeah, there was no live look into the announcement of the Ohio State team room or the lunchroom up there. And so the message from Ryan Day is that everybody's excited and, now you know who you're playing, and now it becomes more tangible. And not that they didn't have an idea that this is who they would be, but now it's definite. So you can, all of the cursory work that they were doing, I'm going to take a look on my iPad or whatever. Now you get into it and you get all of those juices flowing. They'll be back out on the practice field, getting more and more going this week. And then next week will basically be game week, game prep for them and getting ready for this. And it's a very different layoff than we've ever really seen in this level of college football. Is it more similar to like Army and Navy are probably used to it?
Yeah,
but
maybe.
Is early December bowl game in the Bahamas?
Yeah. If you were on that team, if
Mm-hmm.
Ohio State somehow went to the Bahamas Bowl, I think back to 1995, they might have had consecutive weeks off in the middle of like September, or they played the kickoff classic and then waited a couple weeks, maybe 1 year there. But this is definitely a weird, like a double bye almost. But last week felt, I think, just based on what Ryan Day said, like it was a little bit of okay, let's unplug everything, wait 30 seconds, and then plug things back in, and then they got back out there and had a practice on Wednesday.
What if they had to play a game this past on Saturday after that?
Well, after that, it depends on which game it was.
Yeah.
Is it a Big Ten championship game against Oregon where you've got to just, what the challenge is? If they had still gotten in the Big Ten championship game, if Penn State and Indiana had both lost on the last weekend of the regular season, I think that's one where you kind of turn it around pretty quickly, where you sort of know, hey, here's the task at hand. It's the number one team in the country. It's the only team that, the team that beat you earlier in the year. You lost by 1 point. Yeah, obviously this is right there for you. The fact that now you have a week to probably do a little bit more of, it's probably not quite a normal bowl prep week. Normally the bowl prep is a ton of time for the younger guys. It doesn't sound like that's going to be what the case is here. It does sound like they're going to be spending some time figuring things out on the offensive line.
Some young guys on the offensive line getting a look. Luke Montgomery and Josh Padilla getting an opportunity to see if they can win a job, which gives you an idea of the level of concern of things. And I did want to ask, Ryan, do you expect to have a different starting offensive line in this game? But of course, he's not going to give you that answer, and he didn't go into too much depth on what they're looking to do. But you can kind of do the math with Luke Montgomery being a guard and Josh Padilla being a center on what they're looking to do and who they'd be looking to move. And if they're moving, if both of those guys win a job, now two people would be moving out or moving around. So gives you a further idea that they're looking for something. I don't know that maybe two guys will be in there, but and then, because theoretically, say it's Josh Padilla at guard or at center, Carson Hinsman to left guard, Luke Montgomery to right guard, perhaps, or
flip the guards.
So Austin Sierveld gets sat again, and Taker Cibola gets sat. Like, these are all things that they're still trying to work on. Zen Michalski will not be available, so he's not in consideration at this point. Ryan Day did say, hey, maybe George Fitzpatrick comes in and shows that he can play left tackle, and they move Donovan Jackson inside. I would not expect that to happen.
No, he was asked about the fact that, the first couple guys he talked about were both interior guys, and so it was kind of like, so it doesn't sound like you're thinking about moving Donovan Jackson back outside, and it was kind of like, well, which tells me no.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to close the door on that, but also the answer is no.
Yeah,
so.
You don't ever really want to close the door on a player.
Right.
Like, this time of year, like, oh, no, he could definitely.
Well, and if you get – here's the thing. Whether you need someone like George Fitzpatrick to start, we have seen offensive linemen get hurt in the middle of games. So you need everyone to be in full game week mode for the next couple of weeks, really trying to make significant improvements, because there's more snaps available between the end of the Michigan game and the start of the game week against Tennessee next week than you would have in a typical any week during the season. So this is an opportunity for some of those young guys to make a statement, see where you stand. There are legitimately spots potentially available there. So
especially as they work out the whole transfer portal situation and how that's going to go, which is going to be interesting.
Yeah, and so far 3 Buckeyes in the transfer portal right now. Linebacker Gabe Powers, wide receiver Jaden Ballard, wide receiver Kojo Antwi. Those are the 3 guys. And now technically no one's in the transfer portal yet. They've just sort of said, I'm going to be in the transfer portal when the transfer portal opens, which is Monday it opens. So coming soon, Buckeyes in the transfer portal. Right now, it's just planning to enter the transfer portal. But Ryan Day was asked, what does, does that just close the door to someone like, for example, Gabe Powers, who's played on a ton of special teams? You kind of want Gabe Powers to be there for some of these games because you might have some big special teams plays that you got coming up. And it does not sound like just saying you're going to enter the transfer portal, even potentially entering the transfer portal, does not necessarily foreclose the possibility of continuing to play.
Yeah, Ryan Day said they would go case by case on what to do, whether that player wants to, whether they feel like they need to get in the portal now. I think in Gabe Powers' place, and he did say a lot of guys want to finish out the season and then they'll enter, and they know they're going to lose some guys. But like in Gabe Powers' case, I don't think he's a guy that needs to get in right now because he's an upperclassman. He's pretty well known that you would think there would be opportunities for him after the season. He has a role on this team, but each individual person is different, and I would assume they would be like, yes, please stay. And, we would love to have you stay, but it's up to the player then to follow through on that. And because he's a guy that, like I said, I don't think he's going to have any problems landing somewhere, but he's also a guy that recognizes what's in front of him in terms of the depth chart. And you are a middle linebacker. So is Arvell Reese. Arvell Reese took all of your snaps. He was almost he was a co-starter, and he's a younger player. So that math checks out. Doesn't mean Gabe Powers has to check out just yet.
No, and you can, with the way the transfer portal works, there's plenty of back channel conversations before guys even go into the portal. So once you've said you're going in the portal, I don't think Ohio State's going to, even if he hasn't officially filed the paperwork, if he doesn't file the paperwork right away on the 9th, I don't think Ohio State's going to be, really chasing someone down in terms of tampering charges, which you could theoretically see in other cases. He's someone, you put your name in, he's probably someone who goes in with a certain subset of schools in mind, where a lot of times it's previous relationships from the high school recruiting process. So is it Cincinnati? Is it a MAC school? Is it a Purdue or Illinois? Or, it could be any of those kinds of schools. And you have some existing knowledge. You can start to, the coaches who recruited you out of high school probably still have your number. So you can sort of start having those conversations without officially kind of pulling the ripcord.
And they certainly have your high school coaches' numbers.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of how those back channels work.
That is how a lot of those back channels work, yes. So let's talk a little bit about the Ohio State-Tennessee matchup, since, boy, there is a certain subset of the Ohio State fan base that has decided that this is going to be terrible no matter. I get the feeling that if they had gotten Boise State in the first round somehow, or if they had gotten Clemson in the first round somehow, or if they had somehow drawn Purdue in the first round, that a lot of the same people would be saying, throwing up their hands and saying season's over. You have a home game. You have a really interesting matchup. We put together a graphic real quickly on the matchup of the two teams, and statistically, it is an interesting matchup. I said we put together a graphic. No?
You closed your computer. You took it off.
I did? Okay, well, never mind. Okay.
Post-production.
Oh, well, nevertheless. You go through the matchups of the team, just in terms of points per game allowed, points per game scored. Buckeyes 16th in the nation in scoring offense, Tennessee 8th. Buckeyes first in the nation in scoring defense, Tennessee 4th. Buckeyes 29th in the nation in rushing yards per carry on offense, Tennessee 26th. Ohio State 9th in passing yards per attempt, Tennessee 27th. Ohio State 5th in rushing yards per carry defense, Tennessee 4th. Ohio State 8th in passing yards per attempt defense, Tennessee 17th. So you look at the rushing numbers, and it's like, it's kind of similar offenses, similar defenses. Buckeyes seem to have an advantage in the passing. Kevin was saying before the show that you had a lot of Tennessee's points were scored run up against non-SEC opponents. So you look at Tennessee's offense and say, oh boy, 37 points per game in the SEC, that must be amazing. It's like, well, you did a lot of work against the Kent States of the world.
Yeah, and UTEPs and things like that. I think, Tom, what this is going to come down to, the team that runs the ball wins. So I know that is too soon, and I deserve all that I get for that. I think Ohio State, this is a game where they have an advantage in the passing game. But as Ryan Day said, Tennessee has two very good corners, so there is that to deal with. And, of course, you have to be upright long enough, and, your footing has to be there to be able to throw the ball against what is going to be a pretty stout defensive front, as you would expect. I mean, we can talk about the SEC meme all you want, but generally one of the things that they don't lie about is the defensive front. And Tennessee's got some guys. So I wonder, do you see Ohio State running the ball very well in this when they're meeting their average, coming near their average? Because I sure don't.
No, I think that this is a great opportunity to learn from the mistakes of the Michigan game plan and figure out a way to attack some other stuff, because I don't think Tennessee's putting up enormous numbers offensively. I mean, you go through a bunch of their SEC games, 14 points against Arkansas and 17, I think, against Georgia, and 14 against Georgia. It just, they have not put up enormous numbers against good defenses, and this is a good Ohio State defense. So it's really just a matter of, can Ohio State control Tennessee's run game? If they can, Nico, and here, Tony, I've been waiting all year for this moment. Nico Iamaleava.
Boom.
Boom.
Boom. Tennessee scoring 25 points per game in conference play.
Yeah. So. And so you look at Tennessee's offense, and I'll just look at Nico Iamaleava. I'm just going to keep saying that.
Can I do it once? Let me try it. Nico, go on.
Iamaleava.
Yeah, right. It is Nico.
Thank you, Kevin.
Nico Suave. There you go. Nico Iamaleava, Tony. 65.7% completions and 2,512 yards, 19 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. All of those numbers trail Will Howard. Will Howard, 6.5% higher in completion percentage, about 350 more passing yards, 8 more touchdowns, and 3 more interceptions. So just more throwing for Ohio State. What's interesting is you look at Tennessee's wide receiver unit, and Ohio State has Jeremiah Smith, 934 yards receiving, 10 touchdowns. Emeka Ibuka, 743 yards, 9 touchdowns. Then comes Tennessee's leading receiver, Dante Thornton, 25 catches, 647 yards, 6 touchdowns, 25.9 yards per catch. That is bananas. And then Carnell Tate, Ohio State's third receiver in terms of receiving yardage, just about 60 yards behind, 583 yards, 4 touchdowns. Everyone else in the Tennessee wide receiver room, Brew McCoy, 432 yards, 2 touchdowns. Squirrel White, 364 yards, 2 touchdowns. Chris Brazell, 325 yards, 2 touchdowns. So tight end, Miles Kitzelman, 296 yards, 4 touchdowns. There's just not a lot of big numbers, big plays in the passing game. They've really done it a lot on the ground.
Yeah, Dylan Sampson is a tough dude. Looking at Nico Iamaleava, Ava, in conference play and out of conference play, completing 73% of his passes outside of conference play, 72%, 63% in conference play. 3 of his 5 interceptions have come in conference plays. The yards per pass is about 2.5 yards less in conference play, like numbers that you would expect. And I think that's where you need to be looking at in terms of what to expect from this Tennessee offense. It's not, no offense to UTEP and no offense to even North Carolina State, frankly, but what they've done against that, you wouldn't expect to happen against Ohio State, especially, December 21st time. I did look at the weather for December 21st. The high for Ohio State at that point, or for Columbus, would be about 38 degrees. Now, the high at night going to be a little bit lower because the sun is gone.
The sun, and that's the earliest sunset all year in Columbus. It's like December 21st is the shortest day all year. And I'm now questioning myself because I think the earliest sunset is actually slightly earlier and the sunrise just gets later. It doesn't matter. It's the shortest day of the year in Columbus. So the sun's going to set right around 5 o'clock. So you got like 3 hours of nighttime. I'm going to be ready for bed before the game starts. I'm sorry to tell you, I'm old and boring.
There will be a postgame.
There will be a postgame show, yes. Oh boy, will there be a postgame show, yes. One way or the other, oh boy, will there be a postgame show. So, but yeah, this is probably going to be a high 20s. I had seen at one point maybe some precipitation. It didn't look like torrential winds or anything like that, but 10 to 15 mile an hour winds, which is like every game it feels like. One thing that's interesting about Tennessee and Dylan Sampson, Ohio State has done the running back by committee thing. Tennessee has done the running back by Dylan Sampson thing. The Dylan Sampson and Quinshon Judkins. How many more carries does Dylan Sampson have than Quinshon Judkins and TreVeyon Henderson together this year?
Okay.
Combined. Dylan Sampson has more carries than TreVeyon Henderson, Quinshon Judkins. How many more does he have than them?
So they've played 12 games, and so he's probably got he's probably like a 270, 280. So let's say 16 more carries.
Dang. 256 carries for Dylan Sampson. Judkins and Henderson together, 255. Judkins and Henderson have outrushed him by 1556 to 1485. So
there you go.
Like 70 yards. And they've, a slightly more yards per carry and 8 fewer touchdowns. I mean, it is really, if you can stop Dylan Sampson, and it's not easy, if you can stop Dylan Sampson, that's kind of step one to beating Tennessee. Yeah,
for sure. And I don't necessarily buy Ohio State's yards per carry right now either. So like leading, with a 6 point or whatever, like get to 4 point something. And then we can talk consistently. And if Ohio State can do that, then I really, really like their chances. Not that they need to, but if they can. But Dylan Sampson, this is one that's pretty simple. Stop the run, and then whatever else happens, you can live with. Because say what you want about Ohio State's corners, the secondary is a good matchup for against most offenses. Yeah. And Tennessee will, I think the biggest test is just going to be the way they spread out, the wide splits, the tempo that Tennessee does, that you're going to have to get everybody lined up. You're going to have to get everybody ready. The communication has to be on point because the stress level that they create raises the chances of mistakes. And then also the fact that you're still communicating as snaps are coming in. You have to be really, really on it. And they're already working on that. Yeah. Getting it lined up and the communication aspect of things. Cause I don't know how much Jim Knowles is going to be able to tell them. They might have to go back to signals in this game.
And what is the atmosphere going to be like if the Ohio State crowd is there? Tennessee only gets 3,500 tickets. Yeah. Now, I suspect there will be more orange in the stadium than 3,500 people.
Well, it's hunting season.
But Yeah, the band would come out of that allotment as well. Kevin points out. Now there's going to be tickets on the secondary market. Tickets start at $100. Sounds like this is all college football playoff pricing. So we'll see what the crowd makeup is. I would certainly expect a strongly Ohio State crowd. 80-20. If you're getting 3,500 tickets, 80-20 would be 75-25. That would be like a tremendous showing from Tennessee fans.
That would be bad news. That would indicate some malaise from the Ohio State fans, and I'm sure there isn't any kind of malaise right now. But seriously, if
do you not know what malaise means? You do not know what sure means.
But really, like, this is going to be one of a kind, the first of its kind. Probably not one of a kind, maybe, but as sometimes I'll tweet out when I get to a big game or whatever, where else in the world would you rather be? And this is one of those situations where you're going to see a playoff game in Ohio Stadium, and it doesn't sound like the ticket's going to be outrageous. I don't know that they can make them outrageous at this point.
No. Well, and you've got the tickets are right now on sale to major donors and that kind of stuff. There's a link for them. They go on sale to the public on Thursday. So if you want to see one of the most important games in Ohio State football history inside Ohio Stadium in a setting you've never seen before at night, I mean, this is your chance to do it.
Announcers have been announced for the series. It's going to be a Herbie and Fowler game.
Yeah, that's not even remotely surprising that it's a Herbie and Fowler game for that, because this is when we looked at the potential matchups, it was like, boy, they're going to have a real tough time not putting Notre Dame in primetime on one night and Ohio State in primetime on the other night. Notre Dame in primetime on Friday night, even when they're playing Indiana, which is not a big draw. That's going to be a pretty consequential, pretty significant matchup there.
Well, anytime you can double up on the Indianapolis market.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that we should explain, just because this is something we've been talking about for a while, but I feel like some people are kind of just getting plugged in on this. The Friday night and the Saturday night games are ESPN broadcasts. The Saturday afternoon games, which are the Penn State and SMU or Clemson? Penn State, Clemson, Texas, SMU. We did this.
Penn State, SMU.
Penn State, SMU.
Yes.
Okay.
Texas, Clemson
Texas,
is the other,
Clemson is the other one. Yes. Okay. And those are going to be Saturday afternoon. Those games are going to be on TNT. So
Charles Barkley, Shaquille doing it.
Penn State. Kenny, what's the deal with this tight end? It is. Yeah. It's going to be. I'm sure a delighted Penn State fan base to get another noon kickoff for another big game.
Hey,
but hey,
you're in the playoffs and you have a pretty good draw.
Yeah.
Deal with it.
For sure. Do we have questions we want to get through? Oh, before we get to questions, one more thing. Just to help with the malaise that Tony lyingly says is not there. Tennessee's kicker, Max Gilbert, 19 of 25 on field goals, including 0 for 3 versus Kentucky, and then 4 for 4 versus Mississippi State the next week. So how is his consistency? # college kickers. So there you go.
Sounds perfect on those two games.
First question from Rick S. Anybody going to check the Tennessee cleats this time?
That is a great question, Tom. I heard somebody mention about that. I don't know how many people understand or know the reference about the Tennessee cleats from the 1995 Citrus Bowl. And it was rainy. It was a little sloppy. Tennessee had illegal cleats. It was known to everybody afterwards. The refs, John Cooper mentioned it to the refs, and nothing was done. The game should have been thrown out completely, and Ohio State probably should have gotten a share of the national championship. But no, the Tennessee Volunteers doing what the SEC does, completely cheating and wearing illegal cleats, completely illegal, and their footing was much better for it. So I don't think they should. Frankly, that is the legacy of the University of Tennessee. Say what you want about all of the research they've done. I don't know if they've done any. They may have done some medical research. Still, it comes back to illegal cleats. I thought this was a sportsmanship. I thought this was a sporting thing. Celebrating the season and the win at all costs manner of the Tennessee Volunteers never ceases to disgust me and amaze me.
Imagine the disgrace of taking the focus away from this Florida citrus industry, Tony, during their big day.
Right.
Yes.
Making it about Tennessee when it should be about the Florida orange farmers.
Tony is kidding, ladies and gentlemen, from the state of Tennessee. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the concept of sarcasm.
But yes, so that was the Tennessee thing. Like, that's why a lot of people watching may not have any idea of what 30 years ago. Really, who cares?
Oh boy, that was also one fun note from that game was those two teams were exactly tied in the AP poll going in. So it was number 4 Ohio State versus number 4 Tennessee, which was one of the great random tidbits of Ohio State history.
Yes,
All right,
but another loss to the SEC in a bowl game for the Buckeyes way back when.
Next one from El Suzabo. I hope we play with tempo this time.
Well, here's my thought, Tom. El Suzabo saying she hopes they play with tempo. Tennessee's going to play with tempo.
Mm-hmm.
Does Ohio State need to dial it back a little bit to give their defense an opportunity to get some rest so that you don't also go with tempo and go 3 and out? Now, Ryan Day is going to want to be aggressive and swing away and all of that, but you do also have to worry about your defense. So what do you think?
Well, I don't think you need to go tempo for 50 snaps, but I think you need to be situationally go for tempo. You pick up a first down and then, hey, hustle up and move and start to get the ball rolling a little bit.
I would agree with that.
But what it comes down to is that you have to sit there and stay on schedule. You can't go for -1 on first down, and then you can't run tempo because you're already behind the chains.
Yeah.
Tennessee having a good offensive line. This would be game number 2 in a row where I would advise Ohio State to not run the ball between the tackles a whole ton when you have probable advantages in other places on the field.
I concur.
Leads perfectly into Drowsy Dragon. We got this if Day just plays to our strengths.
It sounded like that was one of the messages that he put out there with these games where you get into the playoffs and the postseason, and you got to win however you can, but then why not use your strengths to get it done? And I think Ohio State, you're not going to talk about the overcorrection of fixing something that happened last game. And like, they're not going to do that, but you do recognize where the advantages that you have to make better use of them in this one. And I would expect them to do that, maybe do some force feeding to the receivers, but then also Tennessee is probably expecting that as well. But they can't defend everything. And if they do, then that's your fault.
Right. Yeah. If everything is covered at all times, then you have bigger problems and you're probably not going to win the game. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff that we've talked about, tempo, finding advantageous matchups and taking advantage of them. You don't have to. You can use your wide receiver talent to run the ball as well. We've seen that done with great success at times this season. And I think the other thing you've got to look at is Ryan Day has, in a lot of these big games, it's great to go for it on 4th down against Rutgers. A lot of times he's sort of defaulted to, well, it's a close game and I don't want to make the big mistake here. And so there's been a lot of punts in situations where against lesser opponents, the game's not necessarily being managed that way. That leads to a lot of close games. What was their mantra this year? Leave no doubt. So you ended up by punting in a bunch of situations and having bad field position because of special teams mistakes. You ended up leaving doubt in the Michigan game, and Michigan capitalized on that, and Ohio State wasn't able to. And so if you can get a little bit of separation, get a 2-score lead at some point and make Tennessee play from behind, because if that really takes away Tennessee's strength, and then you want to make Tennessee play left-handed. And so you got to come out hot. You got to go have a good first drive, but actually punch it in. Don't kick a field goal. Don't settle for field. You at this point should not be settling for 35+ yard field goals. That's not, you should never be running the ball on 3rd down to set up a 35-yard plus field goal, because the kicking conditions are not going to be great that night. You know what you got. Like you cannot sign a kicker off the waiver wire. So you've got to, you know what you got. You got to manage. You got to call plays on 2nd and 3rd down to reflect the fact that you should be going for it on 4th down.
Yeah, for sure. And Dave talked about, well, you score points in these games. You need to score points in terms of the playoffs, where in the past he said you need to score 40 to have a chance to win. It's not quite the same, but the points obviously are still very important. And I'm with you. Like, yeah. Do you play a little bit conservatively because of the conditions, and it's like 13 points might win this? So, so then you're.
I would not advise you to play for 13 points.
Right. Well, that's all it takes sometimes. But like anything short of like, 4th and 9, 4th and 11, then you're like, yeah, we probably should kick. But like, you have so many plays in your playbook that will pick up the 9 yards that you need, and you don't know how many times you're going to be down there, and you can't view being at the 30 as scoring territory, because then you're kind of settling. If we can just get to that point, like, no, you got to go beyond that point. And once you get to the point where like, well, this is it, this is an easy kick, then you keep going.
Yeah.
because like I don't think 3 field goals are going to do you much in this one.
No, this is one where, I mean, we'll take a deeper dive, but just my initial thought is first team to 30 wins, period, full stop. I don't see both teams getting to 30, and it might be first team to 27 wins.
Yeah.
This just feels, I think the over under was something around 45 or 46, something like that, and Ohio State was favored by about a touchdown on the opening line, so that would give you like an Ohio State 28, Tennessee 20 kind of game, something like that, 27-20, something in that neighborhood. That feels about right to me. And total's 40, total's 47 and they're favored by 10. So there you go. So I landed on exactly the right number earlier, 27. So that's probably the number you should be thinking, hey, do not expect to win 17-14. Like you're going to have to get to the mid to high 20s to win this game.
Let's see the weather.
Well, sure, okay, and
if the weather's bad, then it's like you really don't want to kick field goals,
right? Yeah, well, then it comes down to special teams and how I mean, but both teams are kind of going. Ugh.
What was the date of the snowball, Tom?
1950.
That's a year.
November.
Not December.
Not
December.
November something or other. This is the first home game in Ohio Stadium in December in history, which I thought that can't be right. Certainly, they played one in December in 2020, but they had, I think that was the Michigan State game. And then I think they had one more that got
Maryland.
Maryland got. I think Maryland was earlier in the year, but they had Michigan State, and then they had the Michigan game that got canceled, and that would have been probably the first 2 weekends in December that year. I saw that and I'm like, is that right? That can't be right. But yes, apparently it is right.
Yeah, night game December. It's gonna be fantastic.
Let me get back here. I was answering a question. Odysseus, tempo and speed option. Also play both Judkins and Henderson in a T.
So tempo and speed option and play Judkins and Henderson in a T. I don't know. Has anyone run the up-tempo T formation offense before? I mean, could be making additional college football history. I don't know that. I mean, sure, you're going to have to run the ball some. Like you can't just run 53 plays and you throw it 49 times and the other 3 are quarterback scrambles when receivers are covers or sacks. Like you can't do that, but you're going to have to, and again, we'll find out what the weather is when we get a little closer, but you're going to have to run the ball some. They have to just find something and then they have to stick with it. I mean, the pause option, I did a show with Ross in the end of last week. They ran that pause option once. It went for like 15, 17 yards, and then they never went back to it. They never iterated on it with like a play action look off of it. It just was like, oh, that worked. Well,
hold this. I don't want this anymore.
And then what?
Yeah. So, like I think the tempo is a way to go because it is effective. Defenses don't like it, and so if defense doesn't like it, do it. But also, they're going to be looking at everything Tennessee has done this season and what running attacks have been successful against Tennessee. How does what Ohio State do mirror that? How can they implement some things like that and get outside? And you can do that in the T. We've seen that before. You get the lead blocker there going, and of course, the speed option. I'll be surprised if we don't see that, but that is also something that Tennessee will be waiting for as well, because they're going to be looking at what has Ohio State's successful runs been. Okay, well, we know we're going to see those.
Right. Well, and that's where we've seen this a bunch over the years where the team is running the speed option and the quarterback takes 2 steps forward and then dips, or takes 1 step forward and then dips, and then the running back keeps running, and then you drop back and you throw a play action pass out of that. This is we're not asking for a reinvention of the wheel here. Like you have opportunities there to do further iterations off of that. So then you run the speed option once, and if it works, then that's the next time you do it, and then it probably opens something up for that again. It just, you've got to kind of keep building on that. And my expectation, Ryan Day has done a pretty good job coming off of losses when they have had something to play for. They have done a pretty good job of coming out and looking like they know what they're doing. The Rose Bowl against Utah, they started slow, but they really hit the gas in that game. Georgia, the next year, they really hit the gas in that game. Last year against Missouri is kind of the obvious exception, and there's plenty of reasons to treat that as you're not just discarding that data because it's not favorable to
Bad.
Ohio State. You're discarding that data because, well, you had to really shuffle your offensive line again. And then you also had your second string quarterback get hurt and your third string guy who everyone sort of universally acknowledged wasn't ready to get thrown into that moment. And then he has to deal with, there's a pass rush. There are guys wearing black jerseys in this A gap real frequently and not great.
Yeah, and Lincoln Keenholz didn't have his black jersey on. Like he got lit up, and you saw how ready he was last year by how little he has played this year.
Yeah.
So now that guy was getting a bunch of snaps in that game, and that game is just a footnote. It is not representative really anything to me. It's just one of those games that gets tossed away because it's not the same team that was there during the season. And you're going to have that with many bowl games this year.
Yep, for sure. Anything else?
Yeah, we got several.
Okay.
Brandon Boyd, Tennessee is around 101st in the country in passing yards allowed. Saying their corners are good was just a diversion.
Well, I mean, Tennessee is 101st in passing yards allowed.
We know how we feel about passing yards allowed.
Yeah, I mean, total yardage, I don't really look at. If you're up on teams, you're going to have a bunch of passing yards. Yards per attempt is a much better way to measure that, because then if a team's running tempo, if a team's way behind and just throwing it on every down, that sort of accounts for that. They're 17th in the country in pass yards per attempt. Ohio State is 8th, 5.8 yards per attempt against Ohio State, 6.1 against Tennessee. So, if you view Ohio State's pass defense as pretty good, then great news. Tennessee is, slightly worse. If you view Ohio State's pass defense as bad, and I know that some people do, facts be damned, then great news. Tennessee is worse than that. So not a lot worse, but comparable. And neither team has been playing fantastic passing attacks all year. It's outside of Oregon, Ohio State really has not played a particularly great passing attack, and they're not really going to face a particularly great passing attack against Tennessee. This is going to be the best passing attack that Tennessee faces all year, I would think. I mean, outside of,
Arkansas,
right? Well, right. It's like Alabama is. Alabama has a good offense, but not an incredibly dynamic passing attack. Georgia's passing attack is.
Yeah, it depends on what day.
Better with Gunnar Stockton.
Yeah, well, yeah, that was. Tennessee. They're the defense again. The high level numbers are good, but it's like you can look at the numbers and make them say whatever you want to. Tony, I want to know, what's Tennessee's record against teams above 500? That's really the only number that I care about.
I'll have to research that one and get back to you.
Thank you,
Kevin.
Yeah. Lisa Sims, can our team figure out how to come out and play fast for the first time this season for this game?
Can Ohio State come out and play fast for the first time this season? I mean, they came out and played fast against Michigan. They had a good. They started well. They went right down the field, and then they went boom, 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 boom down the field, throwing the ball. Had Michigan on their back foot, and then decided time to run.
Gotta run it. I just want to run it.
That was one where I was rewatching it. I'm like, I know they don't score a touchdown here. How did they manage to not score a touchdown on this drive when they're just going boom, 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 boom? And it was like, well, you're in the red zone, time to run. Like, this is an opportunity. Talked just a minute ago. They have used these losses, late season losses, and they've learned from them, and they have not generally made the same mistake again. So you would assume you're not going to see the same mistake again against Tennessee as you saw against Michigan. He said, optimistically.
No, I would agree with that. Like, and if you do the same thing over and you lose again for the same reasons, then I mean, what are we doing here at this point?
Well, there will not be a shortage of content at BuckeyeHuddle.com if that happens.
No, I would expect some changes, some aggression there, and some positive results. And can they get out to a fast start? This is one where you're definitely deferring if you win the toss and letting the Tennessee offense get out there first and just let the Ohio State fan base get after them and create the momentum. As Ryan Day talked about with this game, it's the first game where you can just grab some momentum and just keep going, like an NFL wildcard team that just keeps winning. And it's going to start with the fans and feeding off of each other. And yeah, I don't think you want to have anything to do with being on offense first, but if you are, then go right down and build the momentum that way and get out fast. And this is your script. You should never script a 3 and out.
Good advice.
So I don't know if they're trying to like, hey,
Are you available for consulting?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm around. You have my number.
Well, and I think there's also a certain amount. I looked at a couple recent Michigan games, 3 recent Michigan games, and one of them was last year's Ohio State Michigan game where Kyle McCord is trying to throw to Marvin Harrison and throws an interception, and it sets up a 5-yard Michigan touchdown drive. And then I look at this year's Michigan game where Will Howard is trying to throw a quick out to Carnell Tate, and it gets intercepted, and it sets up a 2-yard touchdown drive. And you're just handing the opponent 7 points.
Mm-hmm.
And I go back to last year's Rose Bowl where Caleb Downs, current Ohio State safety and then Alabama safety, intercepted the first pass of the game from J.J. McCarthy. First pass of the game. And his toe came down. Was it either he stepped out before he intercepted it or his toe hit the white on the sideline? And it was ruled an interception and then rightly overturned on replay. But if his toe was that, I'll do the Jim Harbaugh. If his toe was not even that far, just a little further out on the field, not on the sideline, that completely changes that game immediately from day one. It's just from play one. If you get an early turnover, that's you want to get the fan base to do the here we go again, turn it over. If you want to get the fan base into it and really potentially put Tennessee on their back foot where you get a short field, you score some early points, whether Ohio State has scored already or not, you get some early points. Nico Iamaleava is a second-year quarterback. He is not, this is not a long-term veteran guy. This is not a guy who's been super-duper incredibly consistent.
This isn't Stetson Bennett who's seen everything.
Yeah. You have opportunities to rattle him. I mean, it will not be the first time he's played in a big game, but this is going to be the biggest game he's played in, and it's going to be probably the most hostile or one of the most hostile atmospheres he's played in. So you get one of those early turnovers, and that's, and it's really trite to say, like, well, what are the keys to the game? Win the turnover battle. Like, okay, but like literally don't throw an interception that hands the opponent 7 points early in the game. And that would have changed, Tony, both of the last couple Michigan games. And had Michigan's interception been intercepted in bounds, probably would have changed the Rose Bowl last year as well.
Are you available for consulting?
Yes, I
am. Orange Visor, who is a Tennessee fan, says the line came out with Ohio State minus 6.5. I've also seen it at 7. Y'all think you cover?
So does Ohio State cover 6.5?
I like 6.5 better than 7.
Well, yeah. Let me look at the forecast. If it's clear and dry and not too windy, that favors Ohio State. If the weather is windier and there's precipitation, that probably favors Tennessee, which is a little more run heavy. The bad weather probably keeps the score lower. A lower score favors Tennessee. Tennessee is much more likely to win the game 20-17 than they are to win it 35-31. I think.
I've got mad like 21-17, 24-20, something of that nature. So I'd probably take the points, but that's a day of game thing. Night of game. I
mean, right now, initial thought is take the points and take the under probably, and it's probably but also how much of this is Ryan Day's approach to the game, the Ohio State coaching staff's approach to the game? Are they going to be trying to hit some big stuff early? Because if you try and hit some big stuff early, you could run with it. If you hit a couple big ones early, then you get Tennessee really off on the wrong foot, and then you're making them play left-handed on offense. But that's very easy to say about every game, and it has not happened in most of these games. So my tendency is to say it's probably relatively close, which therefore makes coaches play a little more conservatively, a little closer to the vest, which therefore makes it a lower scoring game, which therefore makes it a higher variance game, and therefore you take the points and you take the under.
Yeah, when you're coaching thinking this is going to be a 24-20 game, don't be surprised when it's a 24-20 game because you're of the whole self-fulfilling prophecy thing there. That's the way you've coached it.
Next one. Jordan B. Crazy that if we go to the championship game against Chalk, we would play Oregon on the West Coast, Texas in Dallas, and Georgia in Atlanta.
That is crazy, and that's. But you have lost your ability to complain about that. Like you controlled your own destiny 2 weeks ago, and you lost 13-10 to a team that was 6-5. So You have lost the ability to complain about that. So now you got to win the games you got to win. And Michigan just came into Ohio Stadium and beat Ohio State in Columbus. So beating Texas beating Oregon on the West Coast, sure. Beating Texas in the Cotton Bowl, sure. Beating Georgia in Atlanta, sure. I mean, guess what? You had a chance to have an easier path and you lost to Michigan. So
Yep.
if they had just beaten Michigan and lost to Oregon, they'd have a substantially easier path. So don't complain to me.
No, and Ryan Day said the same thing. Like once you, the only thing that you can control is winning your conference, and then after that, you're floating on the breeze of whatever the committee wants to do with you. So he's not, oh shucks, we should have been this or we should have been that. It's like we should have won the conference.
Yeah. Well, and I know there's a lot of different ways the committee could have gone with things. We talked about this a little bit on the instant reaction show, but there were a lot of different ways you could evaluate teams. And do you want to look at the best wins? That leads you to one set of results, and that Ohio State probably is in a much better spot in that one. Do you want to look at the overall? Do you just want to look at strength of schedule? Well, Ohio State's probably pretty solid there. Do you just want to look at bad losses? And boy, bad losses / recent losses seems like where they sort of defaulted, because Alabama, which had a bad loss, they're out. Ohio State, which just had a bad loss, they just went from number 2 in the nation a couple weeks ago, and now they're the 8th seed in the tournament. So they were at least intellectually consistent. I think you can certainly, you can argue with, hey, I wouldn't have decided it this way, or hey, this sets up a bad precedent for the future because XYZ, but they were intellectually consistent. This was not, there have been plenty of years that we have looked at the rankings at the end of the year and gone, well, you put this team here because of this, but you put this team here because of that. And then this team, they were consistent, and that's really all you can ask.
Yeah, and the teleconference is going on right now, and I wouldn't assume that there'd be too much, there's controversy, but
Tony, let me introduce you to the state of Alabama.
Well, and that's the thing, but it's it was all uniform. They valued the conference championship games above everything else, and that's the bracket you got.
Yeah.
Another one from a Vols fan, Old Smoky Vol. As a Vol fan, what are you most concerned about when it comes to playing UT? What do you think is OSU's biggest advantage?
So, biggest concern from Ohio State's perspective about Tennessee, Tony, let's just say the unit on Tennessee's team that's the biggest concern. Let's just say the same thing at the same time. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Defensive line.
Aliens.
Defensive line. No, and it's stopping the run of Dylan Sampson, but it's the Tennessee defensive line, and not just can Ohio State run the ball, but can Ohio State protect the passer to throw it? Because they're still, I don't know if Tennessee fans know this, the Ohio State offensive line is deciding on whether it's going to go into some sort of a flux and change some things. But we will be watching at least 4 Tennessee games and giving some reactions to those and what we've seen, what we've learned, like we've done in the past for playoff games. I think we watched 5 Georgia games.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, the 2022 season, we watched Missouri and Kentucky, which were close wins against not particularly great opponents that year. And then we also watched, the Oregon game where they just lit Oregon on fire in that first game of the season. And then at least one more. We try and watch.
Maybe a Tennessee.
It might have been. Yeah, there was a Tennessee. Yeah, because that was down in Athens, and they beat Tennessee pretty good, I think, that year. We try and watch a couple good games and a couple bad games to kind of get you a sense. Because if you watch the Ohio State Nebraska game, you're going to come away thinking Ohio State would go 3-8 in the SEC, and then they would only go 3-8 because they would forfeit the last one because they would be so badly defeated. And then if you watch the
Oregon game,
watch the Indiana, watch the Indiana game, watch the Penn State game, and you'll go, this Ohio State team's pretty good. So you're just week to week, you get the sort of fluctuation with all these teams, and that's just congratulations. It's a group of 18 to 23-year-old young men who are not the most consistent performers in the world.
We'll have the first one of those sometime this week.
Yeah,
we'll like a slumber party. You want to get together? Hot cocoa.
Ooh, I like cocoa.
Footy pajamas.
Are there any other kind?
We have to negotiate some marshmallow situations before we get anywhere close to agreeing on a Tennessee slumber party.
The second half of the question, what do you think is Ohio State's biggest advantage?
Ohio State's biggest advantage, home field.
Hey, that's a good one.
Home field is that's the kind of thing that could have things spiral. Because if Ohio State's going on the road to Tennessee, if this is flip-flopped, crowd noise, the just the overall momentum that comes with a home crowd, that if things are really rolling. I mean, Ohio State had Indiana in hell for a good portion of that game, and that's a pretty good Indiana team. And Ohio State had Michigan really kind of rattled, except they handed them 10 points and lost by three. I mean, that's Ohio Stadium has this reputation as not the loudest place for, considering the size of it. And it's not as loud as Beaver Stadium at Penn State, for example, during a whiteout. But it can get pretty loud in there. And the atmosphere, especially, like you could see stuff spiral. I'm not saying Ohio State's going to win by 40 points, but you could see stuff spiral with a young quarterback, loud crowd, weather that they haven't really had to deal with it before. If it starts going bad, it could go real bad for Tennessee. That, I think, is the single biggest thing, because I don't know that I look and I go, oh man, this Ohio State wide receiver unit is going to light the Tennessee secondary up. It's like there's spots where this is the best passing attack Tennessee's faced. So I think if you're going to look at something on the field, I'd look at that maybe, but
yeah, that's where I am with the passing game, but it all starts with giving Will Howard time. I do expect him to be much better than he was against Michigan, just because of all of the things that went on in that game. This one you would expect him to be ready for and more consistent. And as the majority of the season, he's been very consistent, and they move the ball and they score, and they need to be better in the red zone than they've been, because they've taken quite a dip there. But yeah, I would say the crowd and then the OSU receivers, because they're pretty good.
Yep.
Got a super chat, but don't forget too, Tennessee is used to being on the other side. Neyland is another cathedral of college football, so they know what noise is, maybe just in reverse. Paul the Ball with the super chat. Looking forward to coming to the shoe. Enjoying the show so far. The super chat's a door fee. How do you think Tennessee's defense compares to Michigan? Good luck and go Big Orange.
So that's an interesting one. First of all, I'm really interested to see how many Tennessee fans come up, because that's an easy drive. It's 6 hours. That's a straight shot. I've been down to Knoxville a bunch of times over the last few years for various kids sports stuff, and that's a very easy drive. And that's one that, if Ohio State had gotten a first round bye, that's one that I would have looked at. If they were, we were looking at that and going, that'd be an easy trip. And Columbus is a big city where you can get. There's plenty of hotel rooms. This is not State College where you got to stay an hour and a half outside. Like Columbus, this is not Stark Vegas. No, this
you have to stay in Findlay.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, this is a major American city. Blue Jackets might even be home if you want to watch some middling NHL hockey.
I will say, in terms of Tennessee's defense compared to Michigan, I wish I could tell you. We just haven't watched enough Tennessee at this point. We will definitely, we're definitely going to watch more and have a better opinion. Like I said earlier in the show, I do expect to see a very good defensive front and athletes running around at linebacker, and Ryan Day mentioned the corners, so we'll see. I'm looking forward to finding out more, because when you do this, we watch all of Ohio State and all of Michigan, and we don't really have much time for anything else to really focus on. So we're going to give Tennessee the Michigan treatment here moving forward.
Yeah, and this is always a little bit of a cram session where we watch a good bit of just college football broadly, but not, you're sitting down on the couch and watching a game. I watched the games yesterday, but you're not watching those necessarily in the same way you're watching them if you're sitting down at a computer and like logging stuff and you're tracking air yards of passes and that kind of stuff. It's a very different thing. So yeah, I
Tennessee
think
Tuesday.
I think maybe. I think that there's a lot of similarity to the Michigan defense to the Tennessee defense potentially, and especially just in terms of the defensive line. That to me is where it sort of starts that conversation. Ohio State did not handle that well against Michigan. They've handled it well against other teams. They played Penn State and they handled Penn State, had a pretty good pass rush, and they handled that pretty well. And they handled Oregon reasonably well. They put up 30 points at Autzen. So this is a team that could handle a Tennessee or Michigan defense. Will they? We'll all find out together on the 21st, won't we?
Last one I have in the queue is another one from El Suzabo. I want to know the actual mood of the players. Are they really together for this playoff run, or have they shattered after the Michigan loss?
Well, I mean, the thing about shattering is if you got enough glue, you can put it all back together.
Yeah.
Wow. But yeah, as Ryan Day said, you're not just going to bounce right back from that and get right back on the field. So, but seeing the team, we will talk to them eventually, and they're all going to say the right things. But the only way you'll know is when you see them on Saturday night, December 21st, if they've truly bought in, or if, like starters start heading to the portal. Like, I'm not expecting that. But you'll know they're going to say all the right things. They're going to have that look in their eye. They're going to pin their ears back. But the results are going to be the results, and that's when you'll have a much better idea. I wish I could tell you, like, from what we're hearing, and we will, because this is brand new, so we'll hear more. And what we've been told is that the mood is good, and that they're ready to get back at it, and the leaders are hungry to be back out on the field and get those things going. So, like, I've not heard like anything like, well, why are we even playing this game? Nobody's up for it.
Right. Yeah. No, I don't think this is a lost the locker room situation or anything like that. It's, there was some conversations the week after the game, and and you kind of get through that, and you work through your stages of grief, and then you get to acceptance, and then you move on, and it sort of feels like you've sort of reached acceptance, and you just have to keep progressing and keep getting, just if they can figure out the offensive line. If you give me the choice between Ohio State is the vibes are great, and Ohio State the offensive line is better, I think most intelligent Ohio State fans are going to choose the offensive line is better, because that's probably going to make as much or more difference as the vibes.
Vibes are nice, but offensive line is better.
Super chat from Brandon Boyd. He put it separate from the question. The question is, or the comment, I hope if we're pulling away with this in the fourth quarter, the crowd chants B1G to mock the incessant SEC chants. No, you have to do SEC.
Yeah, you have to.
No, that's not even a question. Thank you for the super chat.
Yes,
but
you have to chant.
Wrong.
Yeah, you have to chant SEC.
Ironic SEC chanting it's like playing neck when you're beating LSU. Like, you have to take their thing, and you have to play Mr. Brightside when you beat Michigan. Like, play jump around. They've done that a bunch. They've played jump around when they beat Wisconsin a bunch of times in the past. Like, that's how you do it.
Yep. No, completely agree. That's what you should do. That should be the plan. But first, get the game won.
But first, the hard parts.
Yes.
All right. So
I got one more. Okay. Paul the Ball again. I think it's a shame that neither team has ever faced each other at home. Maybe this can become a great rivalry.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing. They've only played once in history, and that was at that Citrus Bowl in the 1995 season. For two teams that are as consequential in the sport, I mean, this is like, I think General Neyland probably overlapped with Woody Hayes a little bit. I think Neyland might have gone into the 50s. These are two of the most consequential programs in the sport, in top 10 teams in by a lot of different metrics. They're 6 hours away. It's like, how have they not played at some point in the past at a home and home? There was a home and home scheduled in the late 2010s that got canceled because of, I think that might have been canceled because of the Big Ten, Pac-12 scheduling alliance, which then didn't actually happen.
So close.
So yeah, there have been a couple of those series that you were like really looking forward to, like, oh man, and then they get canceled. I was really looking forward to going out to Washington this year, and then it got canceled because Washington is now in the Big Ten. So now it's not a non-conference schedule anymore. Yeah. So next year, Washington. But yeah, if this was, if Tennessee's resume was better than Ohio State's, and this was an 8-9 game in the other direction, I'd be thrilled to be going down to Neyland. I've been down to Knoxville before. I've been to Knoxville a bunch of times. I made a point to, like, we're down there for a figure skating competition, and I'm like, we're gonna go for a drive, kids, and went over to Neyland, saw the campus, saw the stadium. It was closed, so I couldn't go in, but I was really, it's one of those things where, you're in Baton Rouge, you want to go see Death Valley. You're in Tuscaloosa, you want to go see Bryant Denny. Like, yeah, it's one of those stadiums. It's like, oh, I'd love to see a game here sometime.
Yeah, and if you've grown up watching any college football, like Tennessee's uniforms are known. I'm looking forward to seeing the whites in Ohio Stadium, and that's going to be, I think everybody's looking forward to it. And again, just for the players, the fans, like, everybody's coming out of this, coma, and it's like, okay, there's a game. I could get excited about it, and I think people will.
And you just look around the whole first round. It's like, this is a bunch of teams you never see play, in places you never see them play, in weather that you never see them play. I mean, even the one that I think people are probably the most like, Indiana at Notre Dame. Those are two teams. I don't remember the last time Indiana and Notre Dame played. Notre Dame plays Purdue a bunch, but I don't know that they've played in decades. And those are two teams in the same state. And boy, would the Indiana Hoosiers love to end Notre Dame's season.
Do you think Kirk Cignetti would have anything to say about that?
1991 is your last time that they have
Yeah.
played. Notre Dame 23-5-1.
Yeah.
How did Anthony Thompson do? It's probably
No, that would
past
be
him.
past Anthony
Yeah.
Thompson.
Alex Smith.
Alex Smith would have been there because he was like 93 or 94 was his last year. But yeah, that's a great intrastate rivalry, which is not a rivalry because they haven't played it in 30 something years. Imagine in 1991 telling someone, "Hey, hang on, just wait,
Be patient.
just wait 33 years. Now, is Notre Dame going to win any major bowl games between now and then? Yes, but it's going to be in 1994 and then not ever again after that. But Indiana is going to be amazing. When? Never for the next 30 years. You got to have a global pandemic, then 1 year, and then a couple of years. And boy, if you want to make someone from 1991 feel not great about the future of the world, there you go.
There you go.
Not great about the future of the world or the future of Notre Dame football, but we'll see. But that's the one that you look at and it's like, meh. And Clemson has to go up to
Texas.
That's down. Sorry, but Clemson and Texas. Those are two.
Yonder.
Those are two helmet teams. You've got SMU coming up to Penn State. Like, what's that going to look like? Will SMU be able to play in cold weather? Will Penn State get? James Franklin gets a playoff win.
Will James Franklin get?
Will James Franklin get a? Well, will James Franklin go for 2 for some stupid reason?
No, let's end the show. Let's wrap.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So we don't need to ponder the James Franklin Notre Dame ness of the world just yet. We have plenty more time to do that. And when we were pondering that and pondering the Ohio State Tennessee game matchup and everything else, we'll be doing it at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That's where Tony, Kevin, and I cover the team. Mark covers recruiting. Got our whole team of X's and O's gurus there, making you a smarter football fan. Probably try and have Ross on to do some Tennessee X's and O's shows as well. Because, boy, the offense is so interesting. They have these incredibly wide splits, put the wide receivers out by the numbers, and just completely change the field just with spacing. I'm really interested to talk to him about that, and then a whole bunch of other stuff. So make sure you are subscribed to us. Tennessee fans, find us at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. Just hit the subscribe button. We are going to be talking a ton of Tennessee, a ton of Ohio State, a ton of college football, all at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. Hit that bell as well, because we do a lot of live shows as well. And sometimes we'll just kind of like do something on a whim. So that's the best way to do that. And if you are a Tennessee fan and you want to follow us on Twitter, at Tony Gerdeman, that's him, at Tom Orr, that's me.
Also, Kevin is drinking an orange Gatorade.
Oh man.
That's mine.
And then you're
Kevin_Noon.
Kevin_Noon. So you want to follow us all there, and then at BuckeyeHuddle.com as well. So if you want to follow us there, we'll put stuff there until we get annoyed with people in the replies, and then we'll take a little time off, and then we go back at some point. So anyway, so that will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.